everyone, welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Patreon-sponsored review time again, and it is neither bad nor a comic. You might notice that with some very few exceptions, you don't see a lot of Patreon-sponsored reviews of video games. That's because one of the rules of the Patreon request, if you manage to get the slot, is that video game requests need to be either under 30 hours long, or a game that I'm already very familiar with. My reviews are supposed to be weekly, and anything longer than that is tricky to do when I'm supposed to be doing weekly stuff. I rarely write reviews long in advance, it's week to week. Sure, for stuff that I'm really inspired to write, like, say, the intro to the Rossen review, I might work on months in advance, might throw in some jokes if I can think of them in a Word doc for that review, but otherwise I work on them week to week, one at a time. It's very difficult to write stuff in advance, which is why it's been years between Winter of '83 and the Volume 3 DVD. I actually have a single script written for Volume 4. I wrote it in 2021, apparently. I don't even remember what I wrote in it, and it took like a month to do so. As it happens, it's for a comic called Captain Science. And when I get Volume 4 out in 2028 or whatever, it's gonna be hilarious. What was I talking about? Oh, right, video games. Video games, at least most narrative-driven ones, are a time investment, so they will often take over 30 hours to complete, and the ones that are under that time aren't usually the ones that people want me to review. And thus we come to Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, a visual novel adventure game originally from 2001 for the Game Boy Advance, but was ported to the Nintendo DS in 2005 with an English-speaking option. If you somehow didn't know, the Ace Attorney games are the source of the "objection" meme, which brings us to what the games are about. Being a lawyer. The first thing that people fantasize about doing when playing a video game, of course. In all seriousness, though, courtroom drama makes for great entertainment when done well. There's a reason so many movies or TV shows have utilized it, and I think it works great for a video game, too. And that was a thought I had, too, in the late 2000s when I decided I wanted to try to get into the Ace Attorney series since I had heard so many great things about it. And consequently fell out of it, as I hated playing it. Wait, hear me out here. First and foremost, the game is not bad. This is a me thing. The format of the game is just fine. The characters are interesting and memorable. The setting is weird, but I get why it's presented like it is, and there's a reason so much of it has become memed over the years, and why the series has persisted for so long. But me personally, I'm not really into visual novels already, and I got really annoyed by knowing the answer to the case, knowing what evidence to present during trial, and thinking I have the game mechanics down to get me down the path I need to, only to discover that I frequently tried to object to the wrong testimony than they wanted me to, even though it seemed like the logical one to do so, and I would get penalized for it, and I was baffled what it was I was doing wrong. It wouldn't let me actually proceed, and I was so annoyed I couldn't use the evidence to back up my claims or properly connect the dots for the judge. It became less about feeling like I was doing courtroom drama and more that I was taking a multiple choice test in school that only had one right answer because of sentence grammar or something. More like trick questions constantly screwing myself over. It wasn't fun at a certain point, and I never finished it. But that was well over a decade ago. Let's dig into Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney and see if I still hold that opinion this many years later.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. What's with these awkward subjects? What's all this art so rubbish? To anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he is a man, punch, sporadically a grouch. Linkara, he has his own spaceship, but he's always on his couch. Linkara, ghosts, gods, a universe in flux. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
Let's boot up the game and see what sort of options we have. It's a complicated setup, as you can see. We begin with the first of 5 cases. The first Turnabout. As long as it isn't Star Trek's Turnabout Intruder, we're fine. We see a woman, Cindy Stone, get murdered by this guy with a small replica statue of the Thinker. Ah, good. Since we know the murderer already, it looks like we're Columboing this one. I'll start saving up my just one more thing. He seems shocked that he did this, yet he came wearing leather gloves to hide his fingerprints. Maybe he's just horrified that his Hitman playthrough was supposed to have no non-target kills and he screwed it up quickly. He's already plotting for someone else to be framed for this, and that leads us to the courtroom. We meet our title character, Phoenix Wright, and for his first case, he has been hired to defend the guy accused of that woman's murder, Larry Butts. If this were a Batman comic, Larry would be destined to be some kind of butt-themed supervillain. We also meet up with Mia, our boss, and the woman who will be assisting us with the case. Though since she's our senior, shouldn't she be acting as defense counsel while we help her? Or was Larry just an idiot? As we'll soon learn, Larry is an idiot. Mia is impressed with us taking the lead here. Not everyone takes a murder trial right off the bat like this, especially since you're a tax attorney. Phoenix is doing this as a favor to Larry, apparently, because he owes his current profession to him. Let's meet Larry. Dude, I'm so guilty! Tell them I'm guilty! Give me the death sentence! I ain't afraid to die! Well, hey, easiest case ever! And you were worried, Phoenix! Let's start the trial. Trials in the Ace Attorney universe work differently than they do in the real world. Supposedly due to a massive backlog of court cases, trials are limited to 3 days. No jury or deliberations. The judge is the sole decider of the verdict, and thus he's the one either side needs to convince. This leads to trials being very fast-paced, with lawyers kind of acting as detectives to try to gather evidence outside the normal scope of their job. The judge has a lot of power to penalize a lawyer if their evidence sucks, which seems kind of ridiculous, but I suppose makes sense if the point is to keep things moving. If it's clear that your evidence has nothing to do with anything, you're wasting the court's time. Ah well, at least Larry has the good Mr. Wright to defend him. A guy who the judge has so little confidence in his ability to handle his first trial, he has to ask him, "Please state the name of the defendant in this case." Easy! Court record! You did pass the bar, didn't you? No, I tripped over it! Call OSHA! Having passed the bar, though, that does make me wonder why being kind of nervous is justification enough for the judge to question our competency as a lawyer. The court record, by the way, is how you access evidence for your case to study for cross-examination, objections, etc. It also has my lawyering merit badge. Without this, no one would know I'm an attorney. That is very evident, Phoenix. No opening statements, just go right into calling witnesses. Legal Eagle would have a field day with this game. Oh wait, he did. Well, that was the anime and not the video game, so my joke still works. Anyway, Larry is called to the stand, and we learn some more about the case. The two had been dating, but Cindy has ghosted him, which he refuses to admit means that she dumped him. Cindy was a model who did frequent international travel and was murdered the day after she returned from a trip to Paris. Cindy also didn't make too much money from her modeling and had several sugar daddies, as he calls them. Rated Peggy 12, meaning it's okay for ages 12 and up. She took their money and used it to support her lifestyle. We can clearly see what kind of woman this Miss Stone was. We can clearly see what kind of pain you are, dude. Their theory is that Larry murdered her in a jealous rage, which isn't helped by Larry being very loudly pissed that she was seeing other guys, and him saying he doesn't remember if he was there or not. This leads us into our witness, aka real murderer, Frank Sawit. Feels like his name really should have been Frank Did It. Frank is apparently a traveling newspaper salesman. He claims that on the day of the murder, he saw Larry leaving the apartment with the door still open, and when he glanced inside, he saw Cindy dead on the ground. He was too terrified to enter the apartment, but heard a voice call out the time as 1 o'clock. He then entered and tried to use the phone, but the power was out. Normally landlines are immune to power outages, but in this case it was a cordless phone. He then ran to a nearby payphone and called the police. This is where we get into the main gameplay mechanics of the trial sequences, and consequently why it was a bit frustrating for me. We're given the individual statements the witness made, then have to either press them on these facts or present evidence that contradicts their statements. And there's really no indication of when it's more appropriate to press and when you should just go straight to the evidence, and if you don't do it in the correct order, it's possible to get docked one of the 5 points you have before automatically losing the case. It shouldn't matter in my opinion, since the result is the same. They need to alter their testimony to account for catching them in a lie, but the judge sometimes considers it sloppy or inappropriate if I didn't ask them first to reiterate what they said, even though it should already be a part of the court record, which is what the testimony is, of what they said. So it becomes a guessing game of when to do what step, and if you screw up enough, you've got to do it all over again. And personally, I don't find that fun. Maybe that becomes less of an issue in sequel games, maybe maybe it just doesn't bother other people as much as it does me, but I just got so frustrated with that I never finished the game originally back in the day. I wonder if this is testimony or not. Anyway, the first episode kind of serves as a tutorial level to show us what to do for cross-examination of witnesses. You may begin your cross-examination. Cross-examination, Your Honor? Phoenix. Dude. My man. You're a lawyer. You passed the bar exam. There's no way that you don't know what that is.
You're incapable of that level of incompetence.
Like, I've seen terrible lawyers the last few years who have so radically botched their cases. Late filings, idiotic rationales, accidentally giving over much more evidence than they were supposed to. But I guarantee you that they at least know what cross-examination is. It's the Ultima 9, what's a paladin, line of this game. And I get it. Like I said, tutorial level, it's to explain the mechanics and terminology of the game, but then have Larry or Frank ask what it is, or don't explain the terminology, and just have Mia speak up and say, now's your chance to do such and such, Phoenix. But yes, Phoenix has to be explained this. What exactly am I supposed to do? Mia's expression just kind of says it all, doesn't it? Anyway, we quickly find holes in his story. He's absolutely certain about the time of death, except the coroner's report lists it at 3 hours off from that. Huh. Payne does not have the kind of voice I was expecting from him. The Thinker statue is actually a clock, which tells the time when its neck is twisted. The impact from the blow to Cindy's head caused it to say the time, but Sawit could only have known that if he went into the apartment, which he claimed he didn't. Except he also testified that he went inside to try to use the phone, but no one brings that up. Sawit takes all this well. Your Honor, I move to declare him a hostile witness. After demonstrating the clock's time is off, they try to weasel out of it by being all, well, just because it's off now doesn't mean it was off then, even though, like, it kind of needs to be for this testimony to make any sense, but no. Instead, it's like some big gotcha that completely discourages Phoenix and make him think he's lost. Mia needs to step up and remind him the case isn't over yet, and they realize the clock isn't slow. It's just set 9 hours ahead for Cindy's trip to Paris. Proof enough for you, Mr. Sawit? Or should I say, Mr. Did It? Objection! Don't be stealing my dumb jokes, Phoenix! I have nothing else that distinguishes me out there if I'm not making snarky, basic comedy at the things I review! This is enough to make Sawit froth the mouth and then faint, and I guess he's arrested off screen. And wait, Payne says that Sawit was his client. This is a murder trial. Why would Sawit be a client to a state prosecutor? Or do you need to sue someone for murder in this universe? Whatever, Larry's off the hook and we learn that he was the one who originally gave the clock to Cindy, having made a duplicate that he offers to Mia in the hopes of scoring a date. Oh, and Sawit was actually a burglar who thought the apartment was empty, but then Cindy came in and he killed her because he's not a very good criminal. This leads us into our second case, Turnabout Sisters. I should also note at this point that the cases get longer than this initial one. The first one took about 40 minutes, 1 day of trial, all the evidence to work with handed to me right off the bat. The next cases can take multiple hours to play, even assuming you do everything right. So expect a lot more story summarization for the rest. Still, that brings us to the next mechanic present in the rest of the game. The point-and-click adventure game stuff, where you're going to different locations and gathering evidence and talking with people before the actual trial itself starts. Fortunately, the game does not dock you for missing something in the background. You'll always have to get everything before you re-enter the trial portions. But let's proceed. Mia contacts her sister Maya, asking her to hold onto a piece of evidence for her for an upcoming case that's held in the Thinker statue clock, though with the clock portions removed. Me personally, I keep tiny Poyo figurines in mine. Anyway, Mia is soon murdered using the statue. Phoenix arrives at the office to find Mia dead and Maya over her. A witness across the street calling the police and bringing in Detective Dick Gumshoe. Are we gonna learn that the judge's real name is Gavel Verdict Man or something? Why is Phoenix Wright the least goofy of these names? Mia was clutching a piece of paper with Maya's name on it written in her own blood. Dick Gumshoe, living up to his name, immediately arrests Maya because of this evidence. Now, to be fair, the note could be argued to be what is referred to in law as a dying declaration. The idea is that it's generally assumed that statements made by someone who is dying, knows they're dying, and that they can't be saved are completely true. Thus, if they declare who it was who was killing them, it's presumed they are telling the truth and it's admissible evidence. After all, why would Mia be writing Maya's name otherwise? But, of course, as anyone could argue, there could be many reasons why she wrote it. Her actual state of mind, her not realizing she was dying, or if someone was vindictive and wanted to frame someone they hated more right before they died, etc., etc. So yeah, it's circumstantial evidence, but a good foundation combined with the witness across the street, April May, claiming that Maya was the one who killed her sister. At no point is motive brought up, why she'd want to kill her sister, but then again, the legal system in this universe is kinda iffy already. Phoenix decides to help Maya, at first trying to recruit a lawyer that Mia had recommended to her named Marvin Grossberg, but the guy completely refuses to take on the case, clearly knowing more than he's saying. The trial is going to be the next day, and Maya needs to hire a lawyer or else she'll have one appointed for her by the state. We learn more about her and Mia's family, that they actually come from a line of spirit mediums. Maya herself is only in training for it, so she can't just call Mia on the psychic hotline to ask who murdered her. We also learn that 15 years ago, there was an unusual murder case, and the cops were getting so desperate for answers that they recruited her mother, Misty, to use her psychic powers to help. However, the man her psychic powers pointed to was innocent. Originally, her involvement was a secret, but a man named Wright found out about it and leaked it to the press. The ensuing harassment and accusations of being a fraud led Misty to go into hiding. And after the incident with my mom's ESP, let's not even talk about my other sister Sadako and what happened to her. On an unrelated subject, don't ever own a VCR, Mr. Wright. With the time up, Phoenix has a decision to make. Naturally, this ain't our problem, so we just go home. Maya convicted in this mockery of a justice system. Now, of course, Phoenix takes on the case himself. Why did I become a lawyer? Because someone has to look out for the people who have no one on their side.
Sometimes shit happens, someone has to deal with it, and who are you gonna call?
To further bolster Maya's innocence, since, again, motive should play a factor here, the last phone conversation between the two sisters is recorded on her cell phone. But Detective Dick Gumbrain didn't think to check on that. Also, we have to steal evidence, trick him into giving us the autopsy report on the phone, because I guess discovery, where both prosecution and defense have access to the same evidence, is also not a thing, as well as going into April May's hotel room to find a wiretap in her desk drawer that clearly had been used in Mia's office. That wiretap should not be admissible as evidence, I should note, but again, the legal system in this universe really kinda sucks. Anyway, April May puts on a facade as kinda bimbo-ish, playing dumb, flirty, and cutesy while bouncing her boobs a lot, testifying that she saw Maya kill Mia. Also, she keeps her hands up like that as if she's pretending to be a cat, or Mr. Burns. Thanks to my awesome skills as a lawyer,
Objection, Your Honor, I'm mad!
we get it revealed that not only was she wiretapping Mia's office, but that she was staying with someone else in the hotel, someone who is likely the real murderer. This is not helped by Miss May acting cute and flirty in the court and getting everyone on her side, to the point where even the judge is like, but do you really need to cross-examine the boob lady? But also by the prosecutor, professional Mozart cosplayer Miles Edgeworth. The good Mr. Edgeworth apparently even told a bellhop to specifically not mention during his testimony that there was someone staying with April May. Miles Doucheworth. One could argue he doesn't want to cast any reasonable doubt about Maya's guilt, and introducing the possibility of another killer with shady details like that would hurt his case. But then again, reasonable doubt doesn't seem to be a thing in this universe either, especially when we have a judge who sometimes forgets details of the case or testimony that was given 10 seconds ago. That's another thing that bugs me about the game. Sometimes I need to keep connecting the dots over and over again, even though any reasonable person will be able to remember the details and realize it themselves. This statement contradicts what you just said. Oh, I just forgot. Here are the new details. Oh, okay, well you can go now. Wait, that statement contradicts the other statement you made. Gee, lawyer, stop badgering the witness with little details like whether they're lying or not. Yeah, stop being a douchebag, man. It's just frustrating is all. Again, this is a me thing. Obviously, if it doesn't bother you, no worries. The game is good, it's just things that I don't enjoy about it. Anyway, Miss May is arrested for the illegal wiretapping, but we need actual evidence of this accomplice being the murderer. Phoenix steals some photographs from Grossberg's office, because I guess that's how lawyering works now, and uses them to identify the true culprit. Red White, aka the guy who revealed Mia and Maya's mom's involvement with the murder case. Long and short of it is that White runs an information company that's really all about blackmail. He's got politicians, cops, lawyers, etc., all on his payroll by holding incriminating things about them. Grossberg shamefully admits that he was the one who sold out their mom to him. who leaked it to the press, and White's been blackmailing him ever since, hence why he couldn't get involved in the case. Mia was investigating White, and that's what got her killed, and the same might be happening to Phoenix, as he confronts White with this information, and he decides to call up Edgeworth and claim that he was there, and that Phoenix is the real killer. Oh, and get a load of how White speaks. I was just inquirably asking the title you go by. Inquirably?
Not a word. It's not a real word. It kind of sounds like one.
I'm Red White, CEO of Blue Corp. You know, corporate expansion official. Expansion?
No, well, that is a word, but it's the wrong word.
So I'm afraid I'm not used to conversing with the wordily challenged.
A veritable minefield of malapropisms.
She does gather information for us as part of her duties, but I assure you we do not condone illegal methods.
Factual errors.
So yeah, it's time for Phoenix to be put on trial for the murder of his boss and friend. This has been a really rough week for him, you notice that? Before the trial, we learn that Edgeworth and Phoenix know each other from years past, and implies that indeed the judge in this case is in White's pocket too, so the entire thing is a farce. Edgeworth doesn't really seem to care though. Maya asks how he can torture an innocent person. Innocent? How can we know that? The guilty will always lie to avoid being found out. There's no way to tell who is guilty and who is innocent. Yeah, there is. You're an idiot. All that I can do is get every defendant declared guilty. All I'm hearing here is that you're not actually interested in doing the legwork necessary to determine who is guilty and who is innocent. Well, I'm sorry, Miles. Clearly we interrupted your hair coiffing session to get it to properly part like the Red Sea. During the trial, Phoenix rightfully points out, hey, if this asshole was a witness that could have proven Maya's innocence, why didn't he speak up at the first trial? Miles' response is just, oh, he's just so busy, and I didn't want to bother him and thought his testimony was unnecessary. Which, you know, that's not how any of this works. But yeah, we're very easily able to break down this guy's claims and contradictions from established testimony. The only way he could have known the details he did were if he was in the room with them, with one final piece of evidence being that he says he only looked at the office from across the street because a lamp fell over. That he should not have been able to identify as a lamp unless he had seen it ahead of time. And this dude just, like, crumbles. You know, I was expecting the grand mastermind of this whole affair. This guy who holds politicians and judges and law enforcement in the palm of his hand. This evil genius who seems to hold all the cards in his hands to outmaneuver and destroy me with swiftness and ease. But then I realized one important fact of this whole case. Red White,
As an idiot.
Edgeworth, on the other hand, actually makes a clever maneuver. He has White confess to doing the wiretapping himself, indicating how he knew about the lamp. Get him to confess to a lesser crime to get him off the hook for murder. Phoenix seems lost, but then Mia's ghost shows up. And you guys thought I was kidding when I brought up Sadako. In this case, Maya's extreme emotional reaction to Phoenix seeming to give up is what allows Mia to be channeled through Maya's body, apparently growing and exposing her boobs more in the process. This is a very horny trial court. Mia has Phoenix present the receipt that had Maya's name written on it. White did indeed write the name to frame her, but that's not the important part. The receipt is for the lamp, which was only bought a day before the murder and couldn't have been seen at the time White claims he put in the wiretap. Edgeworth tries to request a day's recess to gather facts, but Mia's ghost then writes out a list of names that she shows to White, which is apparently enough to force him to finally confess. I've seen melted ice cream hold together better than this guy. With Phoenix cleared, Mia heads out, saying they'll see each other again, and that Maya still is weak in terms of her psychic powers. Still, she leaves a note for Maya to ask her to help him as he becomes the new head of their law offices. And I guess she's a Force ghost now. That's cool. Let's move into episode 3, Turnabout Samurai, one of Kurosawa's lesser efforts. It's been a month since the last chapter, and unfortunately business has been pretty dry in the law offices of Wright, Faye, and Ghost. Fortunately, a case soon comes up near and dear to Maya's heart. The star of the TV show Steel Samurai, named Will Powers, is accused of murdering his co-star and villain of the show, the Evil Magistrate, aka Jack Hammer. Strangely, despite the name, it is a spear that kills him, not a hammer. The spear is the signature weapon of the Steel Samurai, and it turns out Maya is a huge fan of the show, though is disappointed to see that Will Powers himself is not conventionally attractive under his mask. Though honestly, aside from him being beefy, I don't really see anything wrong with him that makes him look bad at all. We even get to see a bit of an episode of Steel Samurai. The pale moon in the sky cries for your blood! Rejoice. The moon? No, it is you who should gaze upon the moon. There's a big hole in it because of Marvel Man! Like the last case, there's really no motive for the murder, but fortunately that does actually get brought up during the trial. It's just in this case, the evidence, when first presented, suggests that nobody else was there who could have committed the murder. The studio where Steel Samurai films is hit on hard times, with Jack Hammer himself having become a fallen star that the security guard, Wendy Oldbag, of the Boston Old Bags, no doubt, laments used to be a bigger name, but is now forced to be the villain on a kids show. Which goes to show how much this lady does not understand the industry, because playing a villain is awesome. Often you're allowed to overact and do things you can't do if you're a leading star, and end up being more memorable than the hero. Anyway, point is that even Gumshoe, dumbass as he is, thinks the evidence is pretty circumstantial, a photograph of someone in the Steel Samurai costume heading over to where Hammer was killed, and Edgeworth is not putting in his A game during the trial, though that might be because Oldbag keeps flirting with him and telling him to call her grandma. What he won't admit to is that he's actually into it. It's just he's too much of a professional to indulge in that sort of thing during a trial. During trial, we establish enough facts that clearly there's enough reasonable doubt about Will Powers being the one, especially as we finally get Wendy to admit that there were some other people at the studio that day. Not only a little kid who snuck into the studio, but the director and producer of the show as well. This next section is probably the most annoying and tedious part of the game. Instead of a single menu with all the locations we can just head to, we can only go to the locations connected to the one we're at. That would be fine if we weren't spending a huge amount of time here. It's not like there's loading screens between sections, but it's still a fade out and have to go to the menu to get to the next section and back again. And this next portion has us running around everywhere on scavenger hunts trying to get items for characters so they can give us another item to give us to someone else, or find another character who can advance the plot. Now, full disclosure, I used a walkthrough while recording all the footage for this review. There are only so many hours in the day and I wanted to get it over with as quickly as possible. Which, consequently, this section took 38 minutes long to complete. When I played this back in the day, I didn't use a walkthrough, and it took considerably more time. Because if you don't know where you're going ahead of time, you're just constantly going back to each location, examining everything again, running through the same dialogue boxes again and again, in the vain hope that something new will pop up, or you learn what you're supposed to be doing next. Anyway, we meet the director and show critic. Oh dear God, it's Graham Linehan! No. Fortunately, we're luckier than that. It's Salmonella. That's actually his name. If this game was made in 2020, I imagine we'd meet a virologist named Cole Vid. He inexplicably uses leet speak for his dialogue. I don't get it other than he's a creepy weirdo. After he pervs on Maya for a bit, who I remind you is 17, we meet the producer, Dee Vasquez, who was responsible for saving the studio from bankruptcy. She reveals that those in the meeting were trapped in the trailer due to a statue falling down during the time of the murder, so they're out as suspects. We then find an overzealous fanboy of Steel Samurai named Cody, who would frequently break into the studio. He claims to have seen the whole thing, though we only get more details after we do some trading of Steel Samurai cards. But who cares about those? Does a single one of them have Mr. T on them? I think not. Unfortunately, he claims that he saw the Steel Samurai kill the bad guy, and it's looking more and more like Will Powers is guilty. Fortunately, we always have Ghost Mia to try to cheer us up. You ever stop and think about the fact that in the lawyer game, ghosts and psychic powers are just real? Like, completely no denying it real? Sal testifies at day 2 of the trial, where he reveals that there was a 15-minute break where he could have been the murderer, but it was only 15 minutes! 15! That's only 13 in base 12! And that's terrible. God, stop sticking your tongue out, you greasy weirdo! Anyway, thanks to Cody's testimony at the trial, we get some new twists in the story. That it was Jack Hammer himself in the Steel Samurai costume, and that he went to the trailer with the producer in it before his murder. This new development causes us to have to go back again to the studio to gather evidence. Fortunately, it's not so long this time around, and we learn some more details, including how even Edgeworth is stressed out about this case. He was in the waiting room, and he crushed his paper cup with hot coffee in it. We soon get the details. 5 years previously, Jack Hammer was involved in an incident while filming something. He accidentally pushed over another actor onto a spiked fence, killing him, and Dee Vasquez covered it up thanks to her having mafia ties. She in turn blackmailed Hammer to derail his career and do crappy children's stuff instead. When we confront her with this along with the only photo of the incident, she claims that Hammer deliberately killed the guy, But it doesn't matter because she plans to use her mafia goons to murder us. Boy, it'd be really nice if we had some kind of psychic ghost who could save our asses! Okay, I'll settle for a bumbling detective then. Yes, indeed, it seems Gumshoe overheard and saves our asses, arresting Vasquez. Still, final day of trial, and we need to definitively prove Powers' innocence. We catch Vasquez in a lie or two and propose that Hammer went to confront her about the blackmail finally, but that she killed him the same way the other actor was killed 5 years ago, on the garden fence. She brushes it off as just a theory, and we have nothing to go on. But then it's Edgeworth who comes to the rescue, insisting she redo her testimony and gives us the opening to put all the pieces together. Edgeworth evidently came to the same conclusion, that Vasquez killed Hammer, and wants to see justice done. Still, she had no real motive to do it. But Hammer had all the reason to kill her. The truth is that Hammer intended to murder Vasquez and frame Powers for it, but she pushed him in self-defense and killed him instead. We don't know how that trial goes, but she admits to that part and we win the case, so yay! Miles later talks to Phoenix, who thanks him for the unexpected assist. In retrospect, it would have been better had we not met. Thanks to you, I am saddled with unnecessary feelings. It's not like I even like you, Phoenix Baka. That brings us to episode 4, Turnabout Goodbyes. And it's a big one, meant to put a capstone on a bunch of the previous episodes. At midnight on Christmas Eve, Edgeworth is seen in a boat confronting someone and supposedly shooting him. On Christmas Day, Phoenix learns of this and tries to become his defense attorney since no one else will take the case, worried about their reputation going down if they fail the job defending someone as high profile as Miles. Help me? You? Don't be ridiculous. Sorry? You're a novice. You've only been in 3 trials. Well, somebody needs to get more into the Christmas spirit, it would seem. Come on, Miles. We'll drink eggnog and talk about your impending murder trial. Or do I have to call David Copperfield and Maureen McGovern to cheer you up? Investigating on our own, we get a lot of details, and it ties back to Mia and Maya's mother Misty and that case from 15 years ago she helped with. It turns out Edgeworth's father was the victim, himself a defense attorney that Miles admired. All the evidence pointed to one guy, Misty's psychic powers confirming that, but he was found not guilty thanks to another defense attorney, Robert Hammond. Hammond is the guy Edgeworth supposedly shot in Gourd Lake, with not only 2 witnesses to the event, including one that we accidentally bring in, but there's already a bit of a media blitz around the lake because there's talk of a Loch Ness Monster-esque creature inside the lake named Gordy, which is neat and all, but does this Gordy have pig power in the house? Detective Gumshoe is only too happy to help us with the investigation, really liking Miles, who in turn seems to trust their police work to deliver great justice and all. Anyway, when confronting Miles with all this, he explains he didn't want Phoenix involved because he didn't want him to know about the incident from 15 years ago. Probably because it's so personal for him. Still, with no other choice, he hires Phoenix as his defense attorney, and we learn that the statute of limitations on the original crime is coming up in 3 days. If they don't get someone arrested and tried for it before then, they'll never bring them to justice. On the 3rd day of Christmas, we apparently got no justice. Bummer. The trial begins, and we're up against Edgeworth's mentor, Manfred von Karma, who's basically Edgeworth dialed to 11. Like a complete asshole, he takes charge of the courtroom, issuing orders to the judge and interrupting every single objection you raise. This is around the point I gave up on the game originally, just because it was so much harder to find anything to contradict, and there was little to no room for experimentation to try to find something you could work with. Fortunately, with a little help from Maya and a photograph of the shooting from a witness, we're able to determine that Edgeworth couldn't have fired the gun at Hammond, since the photo shows it as someone shooting with their left hand, while Edgeworth's gun has fingerprints from his right hand. Still, we're not out of the woods yet, and neither is the other witness, who appears to be a poor old man who's gone insane living in the woods near Gourd Lake and thinks his boat renting shack is a pasta restaurant. Personally, I thought the boats tasted fine, but Gordon Ramsay had a different complaint.
We cook spaghetti to order!
Trial day 2. Prediction! The trial will end 3 minutes from now. Well, I could just sit here and not advance the story for 4 minutes, so I win, dude. Unfortunately, Phoenix can't find anything wrong with the old dude's testimony, and we get a guilty verdict. Sorry, Edgeworth, looks like you should have hired Professor Bobo to be your defense instead.
We're going to hear the word panties used a lot in this trial, so let's get them giggles out right now. Panties, panties.
But fortunately for our heroes, I must say a sentence that is very rarely, but not never, spoken out loud. Butts to the rescue. Yes, Larry Butts is involved in this whole thing. He runs a hot dog stand at Gourd Lake, and it turns out Gordy was just a steel samurai balloon that he accidentally sent into the lake. And he comes in as a surprise witness in the last second. Again, Professor Bobo's surprise witnesses were better.
Your Honor, I would like to call to the stand right now a little Amish boy.
He presents some new evidence as a witness, that there was another shot that rang out before midnight that he heard coming from the boat shack. This is also the source of a holiday meme. Almost Christmas means it wasn't Christmas! I mean, yeah, but people like me, we kind of lump Christmas Eve and Christmas Day together as Christmas. Or hell, even the entire month of December as the season of it, just with the big celebration taking place on Eve or Day, depending on your preference, if at all. Point is, Phoenix deduces that Robert Hammond was actually murdered by the owner of the boat shack. Said owner dressed up like him to meet Miles on the boat, fired 2 shots to attract witnesses and make them think Edgeworth killed him, then went overboard. Although regardless of whether it's Christmas Eve or Day, still seems like a bad call to go for a swim in a lake in the middle of winter. Boat shack old man is missing, and the verdict is once again put on hold as we have one last day to gather evidence. And hoo boy, this is a doozy. So, what was the big incident from 15 years back? Miles Edgeworth, his father, and a bailiff named Yanni Yogi, the main protagonist of the anime and card game Yu-Gi-Oh, no doubt, were trapped in an elevator after an earthquake. Their oxygen began to run out, and Yanni panicked, attacking Miles' father and supposedly shooting him. However, Miles has been having recurring nightmares since then, and wonders if, perhaps, he actually picked up the gun and threw it, the impact accidentally shooting his father, and then blanking out what really happened in his memory. As Grossberg will say later, accidental murder is still murder. Not really. I mean, a 6-year-old throwing a gun and it going off is not really the same thing as deliberately trying to kill someone. Even if they did want to try him for that, I see manslaughter charges, not murder. I do really have to question why they needed to bring a psychic in on this, considering how the case went down. Wouldn't they bring one in if they didn't have anybody they suspected? But whatever. At trial, Hammond argued that Yanni did it, but that the oxygen deprivation caused him to go temporarily insane and he wasn't guilty. The court agreed. Miles forever turned his back on defense attorneys, but Yanni's career as a bailiff was over. We discover a letter sent to the boat shack man, who we realize is Yanni Yogi, encouraging him to do this entire scheme and what to say and do. Revenge on Miles for being the real killer and the ruining of his life. Who sent the letter? Why, Von Karma, of course. Yes, it seems that he had a beef with Edgeworth's dad. While Von Karma's had a perfect conviction record, Edgeworth's dad at a trial was able to get some of Von Karma's evidence thrown out, and he's held a grudge ever since. He concocted this entire scheme 15 years later because this dude seriously needs a hobby. He assaults Phoenix and Maya with a taser, stealing not only the records of the original case, with the intent on showing Edgeworth's guilt in that at the final day of trial, and steals the letter in his handwriting that would have proven his involvement. Don't worry guys, I know things look bad, but I've got another lawyer on standby to help.
Your Honor, can I win now?
No.
Okay.
Well, fortunately, it's not as bad. After some trial shenanigans, including cross-examining a parrot, because why not, Yanni Yogi confesses to everything. But Edgeworth confesses his complicity in the death of his father. And with the statute of limitations running out, Von Karma insists on a trial for that. Fortunately, with a little help from Mia's ghost, Maya having been able to grab a bullet from Von Karma during the tasing thing, and Phoenix's own study of the material, we get the real truth. Miles is innocent. Him throwing the gun and it going off did happen, but the bullet went out of the elevator and hit Von Karma in the arm. Von Karma entered the elevator and found the 3 unconscious and decided to get his revenge over what had happened, shooting Miles' father. He still, 15 years later, has the bullet in his arm, not wanting to see a doctor and provide witnesses that could put this together. And yes, people can survive with bullets staying in them for long periods of time, so it's not impossible. And again, we just put a parrot on the stand, so it's not like that's the weirdest thing that's happened today. With the truth revealed thanks to a metal detector and the bullet Maya took for comparison, Von Karma admits his guilt and we win the day.
I got no more use for this guy.
We get a big wrap-up for all our characters. Maya leaves to go complete her training, and yeah, there's some character development stuff, like why Phoenix is so adamant about Miles' character, relating to an incident where he and Larry defended him from some other kids in a classroom trial, or Maya feeling worthless until Phoenix reminds her that her taking the bullet helped save the day. But hey, game's over and the credits roll, and we see everyone talking about how cool Phoenix Wright is. No doubt setting up the next... Ah, yeah. See, this is where the game is supposed to end, where it ended when it was a Game Boy Advance game. But since they were re-releasing it for the DS, I guess they decided they should have some more content to justify anyone purchasing it a second time. Imagine someone doing that. Personally, I would have added a story or two to earlier in the game, some unrelated cases about the same length as the first or second one, just to get us used to a certain flow before we get to the super long and tedious ones, because, well, the credits rolled. The game is over. There's finality to it. I'm not bothered by more, but it seems like it would have been better to preserve that ending. But yeah, let's quickly go over Episode 5, Rise from the Ashes. Shouldn't that be Turnabout from the Ashes? This is the longest segment of the game, which makes sense since it's the last, and again, justifying an additional purchase on the DS, but man, is it a bit of a slog. The story itself is good, with some weird twists and turns, a lot of goofy and wacky characters, but I just mean every portion of it goes on far longer than any other we've done. For instance, there are save points after each evidence gathering or trial section, breaks it up nicely, but in this one, the trial sections actually have 2 parts to them that require a save in between. And this is one where I was especially having trouble getting the damn game to recognize the evidence I was trying to show, and my walkthrough, a spoiler-free one because I'm trying to experience the story firsthand, was not being very specific at some points about where and how to present the evidence, but I already complained about that. What I can say in the real positive, and partly negative, we'll get to that in a minute, about it is that since this section was made for the DS, they took advantage of its hardware. The cutscenes have more complex animation. Examining some pieces of evidence actually produces a 3D view where you can zoom, rotate an object, tapping the touchscreen with a spray to reveal blood splatters, etc. The one bit that I ran into the most frustration with, though, was the fingerprint dusting. In theory, it's actually rather neat. You tap the touchscreen to apply the powder, then you're supposed to blow into the DS microphone to blow away excess dust and reveal the fingerprint. Now, I played this on an emulator. It does allow me to just use a regular microphone for this bit, which I did, but I have to imagine it would have worked a lot better with the actual DS microphone, and the game does not help tell you how this is done the first time. It says put the powder on, then blow to clear away the excess dust. Seems simple, except I'm doing it this first time, and nothing is really happening. I'm putting powder on, blowing into the microphone a lot, different distances, different angles, but there's no prompt that I'm accomplishing anything. No sign that I'm actually getting anywhere. It allows me to switch to another fingerprint. Oh, okay, maybe I need to do this to all of them to get it somewhere. Nope. And by this point, I've been blowing on this microphone for a few minutes, but I don't know if you know this, but taking in huge breaths and then rapidly blowing them out again to get the dust to react actually makes you lightheaded and not feel well. So finally, I grab a little electric fan, and it does do the job mostly, and I think to myself, okay, maybe I just need to do this enough so that the fingerprint reveals. But the fingerprint never reveals. I just blow away all of the dust. Oh, and hey, the fingerprint I already did do, it reset when I switched to another one. So no, I wasn't supposed to do them all at once, I just needed to get one. Finally, I just looked up someone else's gameplay footage to see what I'm doing wrong here, and oh! Turns out this fingerprint? It's not. The person was wearing gloves, so it's just a solid oval. Now, again, maybe this worked better on an actual DS and I'm just the asshole here, but why would you have the very first fingerprint analysis you do here be something that can't produce fingerprints? The actual fingerprints ones went just fine. Dust the area, blow on the microphone for a bit, easy peasy, no problem. But when you're told right out of the gate, here's what fingerprints look like, look for that in your first time doing this new mechanic of the game, and then it's actually doing this? That's bullcrap and added another half hour of me just wasting my time and my footage. Anyway, the actual story of this chapter is really kind of cool and interesting. The chief prosecutor, Edgeworth's boss, is accused of murdering a detective, stabbing him with a knife in a parking garage. She does not deny this, but we're recruited by her plucky teenage scientist sister to get her out of it. The two also resemble Mia and Maya, with the prosecutor actually being an old law school friend of Mia's. To tie this into the rest of the game, we see the aftermath of Edgeworth's trial. Mainly that despite getting cleared of all charges, there were already rumors about him fabricating evidence and witness tampering to get his guilty verdicts, so him being on trial for murder has just made a lot of people lose all remaining faith in him. Either because of the evidence of the previous chapter, or because of how close to home this whole thing is for him, Edgeworth is actually more helpful in this during both the trial and the evidence gathering. Oh sure, he's still Edgeworth about it, but he's cross-examining the witnesses just as much as you are, and letting you take the lead on a lot of evidence and not trying to contradict you or anything. Now, like I've been saying, the story itself is good, but here's the thing. When I was deciding to do this review, I looked up the game's length, and it said to be about 17 hours. My playthrough is 18 hours, which accounts for a few mistakes I made and the fingerprint crap. 8 hours of that, however, is just this story. Almost half of this game's length is just this story. And if you like these games and the playstyle, that's justification enough to get it. But for me, this was really frustrating because I thought I could finish the game a lot sooner than I did. But as for the actual story, it turns out that prosecutor, Lana Skye, was covering up for the chief of police, the real murderer. In a bit of a repetition of the earlier sections, it involves an old case that's come back to haunt them. They had apprehended a serial killer, who in turn attempted to flee, but was stopped by another prosecutor, whom the serial killer murdered. However, it turns out the story behind this is a lie, a fabrication by the now chief of police to not only get the guy convicted and executed, but to blackmail Lana by making it seem like her sister had actually killed the prosecutor by accident. Again, echoes of Edgeworth's story. The police chief, Gant, thinks he's covered all the angles, even coming back in before the final part of the trial, and loudly told Lana to lie about him. I don't think you need me to tell you this, but if you accept Mr. Wright's claim, there will be terrible consequences. So, witness tampering is just not a thing in this universe, right? Because he just went in front of a judge, the prosecutor, the defense, an entire audience, and threatened her loved one. No one's got a problem with that? At all? Objection! Mind you, I'm confused how this case went to trial to begin with. It seems like if someone pleads guilty right away, then there's no reason to hold a trial, but what do I know? Near the end, Gant thinks he has the upper hand by forcing us to reveal evidence that Emma, Lana's sister, killed the guy. Before I do that, there's just one little thing I have to clear up. Columbo moment achieved. Naturally, we get him in the end. Lana's still guilty of a lot of evidence tampering over the years and is still an accessory to this crime, but she isn't a murderer. Happy ending all around, though Miles in the end credits, it would seem, decides to resign his position, though apparently in the sequel it's vague enough for people to think it's a suicide note. Also, the end credits have you doing the fingerprint thing again to reveal some artwork because it's mocking me and wants me to suffer.
He tasks me. He tasks me, and I shall have him.
And so our game truly ends like the original game's end credits, checking in on all the characters, even Maya, who is planning on returning to the agency once her training is complete. This game does not suck at all. It's good, it's just not for me. Despite my complaining and grumbling, this is still a fun experience if you like visual novel-style storytelling, but with a bit of logic puzzle solving added in. The characters can be ridiculous to the point of cartoonishly over the top, yet that is also what makes them so memorable and fun. It wouldn't surprise me if some kids who played this game when they were younger got inspired to become lawyers in some regard, if only because they enjoyed the idea of trying to fight for the justice of their clients or to prosecute wrongdoers. The overall experience is worth a try to see if it's the kind of thing you'd enjoy. It's just I know that it's not my own cup of tea. And even though the fingerprint mechanic was a frustration for me, I suspect that's just mostly because I was playing on an emulator. You'll probably have better luck doing this on an actual DS. Next time, another Patreon-sponsored review, and my first ever Garth Ennis review. We're going to Hellblazer.
That coming
You with your objections and your evidence. Just who do you think you are? Well, given he doesn't know what cross-examination is, not a lawyer apparently. Hello my friends, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on new video releases. If you'd like to support future videos, you can check out my Patreon or purchase a t-shirt via Teespring or Shark Robot. Thanks for watching!